Alright, folks, gather round and listen close. This is Cyrus Kade, your friendly neighborhood investigative reporter, coming to you from the chilly streets of Minneapolis. But tonight, I'm not here to talk about our local haunts. No, I've got a tale that'll make your blood run colder than a Minnesota winter. It all started on a blustery January evening. I was huddled in my dingy office, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee and scrolling through news feeds. That's when I stumbled upon a story that would change my life forever. The infamous LaLaurie Mansion in New Orleans. Now I know what you're thinking. Cyrus, why would a Minneapolis reporter care about some old house down in the Big Easy? Well, let me tell you, sometimes the stories find us, and this one had its icy fingers wrapped around my throat from the get-go. The LaLaurie Mansion, built in 1831, stood like a grand, gray sentinel in the heart of the French Quarter. But behind its stately facade lay a history so dark, so twisted, it makes our Midwest ghost stories look like bedtime tales for toddlers. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than met the eye. So I did what any self-respecting investigative reporter would do. I booked a one-way ticket to New Orleans. Little did I know, I was about to embark on a journey that would test the very limits of my sanity. As the plane touched down in Louis Armstrong International Airport, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The humid air hit me like a wet blanket as I stepped onto the tarmac. Welcome to New Orleans, Cyrus. Hope you packed your courage. My first stop was the French Quarter, where the LaLaurie Mansion loomed at 1140 Royal Street. Standing before it, I felt a sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake. The mansion seemed to watch me, its windows like dark, hollow eyes peering into my soul. "Hey, mister." A voice startled me out of my reverie. I turned to see a young boy, no more than 12, eyeing me curiously. "You here for the ghost tour?" I chuckled, trying to mask my nerves. "No, kid, I'm here to uncover the truth." The boy's eyes widened. "You don't want to do that, mister. Some things are better left buried." With those ominous words, he scampered off, leaving me alone with the imposing structure. I took a deep breath and approached the iron gates. It was time to dive into the dark history of the LaLaurie Mansion. Now, folks, let me paint you a picture of the woman at the center of this macabre tale, Madame Delphine LaLaurie. In the 1830s, she was the toast of New Orleans society. Beautiful, charming, and married to a respected doctor. But beneath that polished exterior lurked a monster of unspeakable cruelty. I spent days poring over historical records, newspaper clippings, and eyewitness accounts. The more I uncovered, the more my stomach churned. Madame LaLaurie, it seemed, had a penchant for torturing her slaves. But the true extent of her depravity wouldn't be revealed until that fateful night in April 1834. Picture this. A grand soirée in full swing, the cream of New Orleans society sipping champagne and dancing in blissful ignorance. Suddenly, smoke begins to fill the air. Fire. In the chaos that ensued, a horrible truth was uncovered. As firefighters battled the blaze, they made a grisly discovery in the attic. Slaves, mutilated and tortured beyond recognition, some chained to the walls, others crammed into tiny cages. The horrors they found defied description. But here's where things get really interesting, folks. As I dug deeper, I uncovered whispers of something even more sinister. Rumors of dark rituals, of unholy pacts made in blood-soaked rooms. Could there be more to this story than mere human cruelty? Determined to find out, I managed to convince the current owners to let me spend a night in the mansion. As the sun set on my first evening in New Orleans, I found myself standing alone in the very attic where those unspeakable acts had taken place. The air was thick with the weight of history and something else. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I set up my equipment, cameras, audio recorders, EMF detectors, and settled in for a long night. Hours ticked by, the silence broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood. Just as I was beginning to think this might be a bust, a cold breeze whispered across the back of my neck. I spun around, heart pounding, but saw nothing. "Hello?" My voice sounded small in the vast, empty space. "Is anyone there?" Silence. Then, so faint I almost missed it, a whimper. It seemed to come from the far corner of the attic. I approached slowly, my flashlight beam dancing across the dusty floorboards. That's when I saw it. A dark stain on the wood, roughly the size and shape of a human body. As I knelt to examine it closer, a bone-chilling scream pierced the air. I jumped back, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. The scream faded, replaced by soft, pitiful sobbing. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "Show yourself!" Suddenly, the temperature plummeted. My breath came out in visible puffs, and frost began to form on the windows. And then, before my disbelieving eyes, a figure began to materialize. It was a woman, her form translucent and shimmering in the dim light. She wore a grand dress from another era, her hair piled high atop her head. But her face, oh God, her face. It was a mask of pure malevolence, her eyes burning with an unholy fire. "Madame LaLaurie," I whispered, unable to believe what I was seeing. Her lips curled into a cruel smile. "Welcome to my home, Mr. Kade," she purred, her voice like silk over steel. "We've been expecting you." I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. Ghosts weren't real. They couldn't be. And yet, here she was, as real as the fear coursing through my veins. "What do you want?" I managed to choke out. Her laughter was like breaking glass. "Want? Oh, my dear boy, I want what I've always wanted. Power, pleasure, pain." With each word, she glided closer. I could feel the cold emanating from her spectral form, seeping into my bones. I wanted to run, to scream, to wake up from this nightmare. But I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by a terror I'd never known existed. "You see, Mr. Kade," she continued, circling me like a predator, "death is just the beginning. There are forces at work here that your feeble mind couldn't possibly comprehend." As she spoke, the air around us seemed to thicken. Shadows danced at the edges of my vision, taking on grotesque, impossible shapes. And the voices. Oh God. The voices. Whispers and screams, pleas for mercy and howls of agony, all blending into a cacophony of suffering that threatened to drive me mad. "What did you do?" I gasped, fighting to maintain my grip on reality. Madame LaLaurie's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too numerous. "I made a bargain, my dear, a bargain sealed in blood and pain. And now I have all of eternity to perfect my art." As she spoke, the shadows coalesced, taking on more solid forms. To my horror, I realized I was surrounded by the tortured souls of LaLaurie's victims. Their bodies were twisted, mutilated echoes of humanity, their eyes filled with a pain that transcended death. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying that when I opened them, this nightmare would be over. But when I looked again, the scene before me had only intensified. The walls seemed to pulse with an unholy light, and the air was thick with the metallic scent of blood. "You don't understand," I pleaded, searching for any shred of humanity in those cold, dead eyes. "I'm just here to report the truth." LaLaurie threw back her head and laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "The truth? Oh, you foolish, foolish man. The truth is far more terrible than you could ever imagine." With a wave of her spectral hand, images began to flash before my eyes. I saw the mansion as it was in its heyday, grand parties masking the horrors that took place behind closed doors. I saw LaLaurie in her secret chamber, performing rituals that made my stomach churn. But it wasn't just the past I was seeing. Somehow, impossibly, I was witnessing the present too. Tourists wandering through the mansion, blissfully unaware of the malevolent presence that watched their every move. Ghost hunters setting up equipment, not realizing that they were the ones being hunted. And the future? Oh God, the future. I saw darkness spreading from the mansion like a cancer, infecting the city, the country, the world. I saw humanity enslaved to powers beyond comprehension, with Madame LaLaurie at the center of it all, presiding over a kingdom of eternal torment. "You see now?" LaLaurie's voice cut through the visions, bringing me back to the nightmarish present. "You're not here to uncover the truth, Mr. Kade. You're here to become part of it." As she spoke, I felt invisible hands grabbing at me, pulling me towards the writhing mass of tortured souls. I fought with every ounce of strength I had, but it was like trying to swim against a riptide. "No!" I screamed, my voice lost in the cacophony of wails and whispers. "This isn't real. It can't be real." LaLaurie's laughter echoed through the attic. "Oh, but it is, my dear, and now you have a choice to make. Join us willingly, and I'll grant you power beyond your wildest dreams. Resist, and, well, I've had centuries to perfect the art of persuasion." As she spoke, one of the tortured souls broke free from the mass, lurching towards me. With horror, I recognized the face of the young boy I'd met outside the mansion. But now his eyes were hollow, his skin a patchwork of scars and open wounds. "Help us," he pleaded, his voice a raspy whisper. "End this, please." In that moment, something inside me snapped. This was wrong. All of it. Whatever dark forces were at work here, whatever bargain LaLaurie had made, it had to be stopped. I don't know where I found the strength, but somehow I broke free from the spectral grip that held me. I lunged for my bag, fumbling for the small vial of holy water I'd brought as a joke. Some joke. "Enough," I shouted, uncorking the vial. "In the name of all that's holy, I command you to leave this place." I splashed the water in a wide arc, and the effect was instantaneous. The spirits recoiled, their wails rising to a fever pitch. LaLaurie's face contorted in rage, her form flickering like a faulty television signal. "You fool," she shrieked. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." But I didn't stop. I kept flinging the holy water, reciting every prayer and exorcism rite I could remember. The air crackled with energy, and the very foundations of the house seemed to groan in protest. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The spirits vanished, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, and I was left alone in a dusty, empty attic. I didn't wait around to see if it was truly over. I grabbed my equipment and ran, not stopping until I was safely back in my hotel room. As the first rays of dawn broke over the city, I sat at my laptop, my hands shaking as I tried to make sense of what I'd experienced. The story I filed that day was the hardest I've ever had to write. How do you put into words an experience that defies all logic? All reason? How do you convey the bone-deep terror of coming face-to-face with true evil? In the end, I told the truth as best I could. I wrote about the mansion's dark history, about the lingering sense of malevolence that permeates its walls, but the full extent of what I saw, what I experienced, that I kept to myself. As I sit here now, back in the relative safety of my Minneapolis office, I can't help but wonder if it's truly over. Did I manage to banish the evil that dwelled in the LaLaurie Mansion, or did I merely drive it into hiding? And if it's still there, waiting, watching, what happens when it decides to seek revenge? But here's the real kicker, folks. The thing that keeps me up at night, that has me jumping at shadows and double-checking the locks on my doors. What if it followed me home? You see, ever since that night in New Orleans, strange things have been happening. Objects moving on their own. Whispers in empty rooms. And sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I could swear I see a figure in an antebellum dress, watching me with eyes that burn with unholy fire. Is it my imagination, my mind trying to process the unprocessable? Or did I unknowingly bring a piece of that evil back with me? Have I become a conduit for something dark and terrible to enter our world? I've tried to convince myself that it's all in my head, that the horrors I witnessed in the LaLaurie Mansion were some sort of mass hallucination, a trick of the mind brought on by suggestion and the power of myth. But deep down, I know the truth. The nightmares come every night now. I see Madame LaLaurie's face, twisted in that cruel smile. I hear the screams of her victims echoing through time. And I feel the cold touch of spectral hands reaching for me from the shadows. I've consulted experts, paranormal investigators, psychics, even a Catholic priest who specializes in exorcisms. They all say the same thing. Whatever I encountered in that mansion was beyond their experience, beyond their ability to explain or combat. So here I am, sharing my story with you. Not just as a reporter seeking the truth, but as a man desperate for answers, for help, for some way to escape the darkness that seems to be closing in around me. I've taken precautions, of course. My apartment is lined with salt. Protective symbols from half a dozen religions adorn my walls. I sleep with a crucifix under my pillow and a vial of holy water on my nightstand. But in the dead of night, when the shadows seem to move of their own accord and the air grows thick with malevolence, I can't help but wonder, is it enough? Can any of us truly be safe from the evil that lurks in the dark corners of our world? And so, dear listeners, I leave you with this warning. The next time you pass an old house with a dark history, the next time you feel a chill run down your spine for no apparent reason, remember my story. Remember the LaLaurie Mansion, and ask yourself, what if the ghosts of the past aren't content to stay in the past? What if they're reaching out, even now, seeking new victims, new souls to add to their eternal torment? As for me, I'll keep searching for answers. I'll keep fighting against the darkness that threatens to consume me. But if one day you hear that Cyrus Kade has disappeared, if my byline suddenly vanishes from the papers, well, you'll know what really happened. And maybe, just maybe, you'll say a prayer for my soul. Because God knows I'm going to need all the help I can get. This is Cyrus Kade, signing off. And remember, folks, sometimes the real monsters aren't the ones hiding under your bed. Sometimes they're the ones hiding behind a facade of Southern charm and antebellum grace. Sometimes they're the ones who've had centuries to perfect their craft. So sleep tight, dear listeners. And whatever you do, don't let the ghosts of the LaLaurie Mansion haunt your dreams. Because once they get their hooks in you, there's no telling if you'll ever break free. Good night, and good luck. You're gonna need it.
Thanks for joining us in the shadows tonight. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories every week. Have you got a story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And remember, the darkness holds many secrets. Are you brave enough to uncover them? Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Sweet nightmares.